Cool, Jim. We're live. Let's go.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. Well, welcome everybody to Office Hours, Indexer Office Hours number 25. Today we have a special Indexer Office Hours to have a chat with the team from Figment, who have joined as the third core developer team for the Graph protocol with a $90 million grant over 5 years. So we will be sacrificing most of today's usual topics to have a discussion, a fireside chat with the Figment team. But I do want to cover, since this is a special week for Ethereum, I want to cover, make sure everyone's aware. I'm sure you are, but just to be sure that everyone's aware. The Ethereum London upgrade is occurring at block 12,965,000, which falls somewhere around Thursday this week. So obviously it's critical that you have your production Ethereum clients up to date prior to that, otherwise you'll end up on the wrong chain. Whoever's activating their mic, if you would mind muting that. Okay, so let's get into the bulk of the chat today. So this is really a chance. This chat with Figment is a chance for indexers and anyone in the community really to get them to know the guys and gals behind the name, to ask questions and understand what this core developer alignment for Figment means for the Graph and for the ecosystem as a whole. So as I said earlier, Figment have joined the Graph ecosystem as the third core developer team on the protocol alongside Edge and Node and Streaming Fast as part of a $90 million grant over 5 years, securing Figment talent, technology, and leadership for the protocol. Figment was founded in 2018 by Matt Harrop, Lorian Gable, and Andrew Kronk, and is one of the largest blockchain infrastructure and services company in this space. So with us today, we have some of the team. We have Andrew Kronk, who is the Chief Product Officer and co-founder, Joseph Alchami, who is Product Manager at Figment, Jessica Pichowski, the back-end team lead, Matt Kornatz, Software Engineer at Figment, and Lukasz Mikowski, Lead Engineer for Graph Protocol work at Figment. So guys, congratulations and welcome to Office Hours.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us all.
So I think in the spirit of Office Hours, I want to try and keep this as open and flowing as possible. We have a lot of people here up on the stage, people who generally take part in the discussion. So I'd like to make it clear that I've put out some points and questions here that I'd like to go through personally with the team. But anybody is welcome to interrupt at any point, especially once we get into the technical piece, to sort of steer the conversation if there's something you'd be interested to learn from the Figment team. So let's kick things off with my usual piece around, I like to know a little bit about where people started in crypto or how they ended up in this industry. So Andy, maybe if we start with you, what was your introduction? What's your journey when it comes to crypto?
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. So, like you mentioned, we started the company in 2018, but this is the fourth company I've started. My last one before this was a time series database, a hosted database, and so I've done bootstrapping, I've done VC-backed things, and after we were able to exit that last company in 2016, was taking a break, and a friend came to me and they said, "Hey, I just had a baby, and I want to upload the photos online. Where should I put the photos of my baby?" And I said, "I don't know, there's a million places." And they said, "Well, if I put them on Facebook, they're going to scan my baby's face, do facial recognition, and sell me diaper ads. If I send them to you in Gmail, they're going to read the contents of my message. Where can I own my data online and have right to privacy?" And that is what kind of kicked it off for me. And so in 2016, I started saying, why doesn't more of the internet work like email? Why aren't there more sort of distributed or decentralized systems? And started going down the rabbit hole there. When we started the company, come to find out, one of the first people we hired, he's from Argentina, and the government actually cleared out his father's life savings one night, overnight, just took it. And so there's a lot of stories we have like this and how people got into it, but that's how I got into it. And so for me, the motivation is always moving toward this concept of Web3. And everyone can define Web3 how they like. And so to me, I started with like three basic things. One is a right to owning your data. Two is a right to privacy online. And three is some sort of control of your identity. And everything we do at Figment is to that end. But you might say like, well, what does staking have to do with that? Because we started a staking business. So I want to quickly outline is just how we got to here. Because I think it all makes sense. If we're all sort of marching towards Web3, our strategy was we need to launch as many decentralized networks as possible. And so we picked blockchains, and we specifically picked proof of stake. We thought in 2017 that every new blockchain would be using proof of stake. And so we said, let's get really good at staking, and let's be a staking infrastructure provider that launches as many blockchains as we can. And so that was Figment. And so I think now we're on 50 mainnets and testnets. We have a pretty scaled out infrastructure team, which runs a lot of validators. And the next thing we did was, as we started launching networks, the question was, does anyone use this stuff? Like, how do you know who the good validators are? And so that led us to really create some software called Hubble. Hubble is a block explorer for proof of stake networks. It's open source. We've been running it for over 3 years. It's a Ruby on Rails app. And one of the very first things we noticed after we started building and scaling this out, we launched on Cosmos and Tezos and other ones, the first networks to launch, was we ran into this indexing problem. And so, we started with the monolithic Rails app. We factored out the indexing code into a Golang code base and iterating on that for about 2.5 years. And so through running a block explorer, through trying to index tons of different chains, that's how we kind of got our footing into this indexing world. And if you look at what we've done today, a lot of what we've done is using a programming language called Golang. We've been through multiple versions and iterations of that. Everything is open source, by the way. If you look on our GitHub, you'll find probably indexers on 15 different networks with a core indexing engine. All that's open source. And so that's how we've been iterating in the space. And so, our goal was to move towards Web3. We launched a bunch of blockchains. We added this sort of analytics layer with Hubble, which introduced us to the indexing challenge. Then we switched over to developers, and we said, how do we get more developers adopting these networks? We created a software called Data Hub. You can think of Data Hub like Infura for all the other networks. And so, I think we have 16 different networks on Data Hub, and that Data Hub is full nodes as a service. We started offering up these indexers as a service as well, and that was very popular. So a very common indexer is we do a whole network index called a transaction search. So imagine you're building a wallet, and you want to say, show me all transactions for this address, filter by senders, all sorts of stuff like that. Those are the kind of indexers and APIs we've done sort of at the network. And the final thing we've done is in order to increase the amount of developers who are in Web3, we created a software called Learn, Figment Learn. It's interactive tutorials to teach Web2 developers how to become Web3 developers. And we have 3,500 people who are now part of that community and learning every sort of network from Solana to Matic to Polkadot. We've done a ton. And so those are sort of the four things we've done so far. I wanted to talk for a little bit just to kind of describe how we got into it and what the overarching mission is. But you'll notice that we do a couple different things, right? We have a staking business, we have a block explorer business, we have our Data Hub business, we have Learn, which is like a community business. And so I'll pause there because I can then speak to why we decided to work on the graph. But that's how we got started. And that's how we got to today.
Awesome. So you've given us the origin story of the company as well as yourself there, which is very interesting. A lot of I think the most interesting origin stories for me, like personal origin stories, are the ones that have come through necessity. So you mentioned there a friend who had their bank account drained by their government. Those are the types of stories that I'm most interested in, and the privacy piece as well. Often engineers, they'll come at it from it's the technology mind virus that they get. But when I think it's a whole different world when, you're talking about technology that's liberating you, right, from some power that you have no control over. So always very interested to hear those stories. Mm-hmm. So maybe let's introduce Joseph. I think many of you will know Joseph in the Indexer community. Joseph, welcome to the call.
Hey, Jim. Thanks again.
So go ahead.
Yeah, my story for the crypto, how I got involved, is back at the days when I was at the University of Montreal studying mathematics. I had one of my friends that participates in a lot of competitions. And one day he invited me to participate in a fintech competition here in Montreal. It is the biggest fintech competition in all Canada. So we went there, and there was multiple challenges, and everyone was running away from the blockchain crypto challenge. So it naturally drew me towards it. And then we were in this competition against groups formed by professionals, and it was really tough competition. So we won, and it was a sweet victory. Then after it, we got funded to start to launch a startup, and we did. But since we were four students, two of us decided that they just want to leave it and focus on their studies. So I kept going with a friend, and then I got an offer from another blockchain startup here in Montreal, which was acquired by Grant Thornton, one of the largest audit companies in the world. And there I was actually doing numerical analyst. They had a lot of mathematical problems related to blockchain and crypto, and I was solving it. And then very fast, the product manager wanted to launch a tax product. So we started it, me and him. And then after figuring out all the logic and mathematics calculations behind it, we were more leading the project. And this is how I got into crypto.
Well, it's very clear to me now why you're such a big player in the query fee dynamics work that we're doing, right? So mathematics is your thing then, Joseph?
Yeah, man.
That's very cool. So let's introduce Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the call.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into the crypto space.
So before work, well, I guess it started when I started working at Figment. So I joined Figment just over a year ago, and was completely green to the crypto space. But was immediately impressed with all the amount of development that has gone on in blockchain and the amount of talent with people working here.
That's quite a learning curve then. So you're a developer and you're also learning this whole new space at the same time in the space of a year.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So how's that experience been for you? I mean, so you said prior to that you weren't really involved in the crypto side. Did you come into it with like pessimism or like technical interest, or what was it like? Because sort of being a green horde coming into the crypto space.
Just very interested. I've always enjoyed learning new things and new challenges. So it was really exciting to start something completely different from anything I've done before. Well, previously I worked at a social media crawling company. So we were indexing, social tweets and things like that, YouTube videos. So that experience kind of correlates with what we're doing at Figment with indexing blockchains. But dealing with blockchains is a lot funner than social media.
Sure. Okay, let's move on to Matt. Matt, welcome to the call.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't have as interesting of an origin story, I guess. I've been working in the Web 2 world for quite a while, and really only got involved in the crypto space earlier this year, really diving in, reading as many white papers as I can and trying to understand the technologies. And I've only been with Figment for about 2.5 months now, so I'm a relative noob in the space. But what really attracted me was the vision of Figment, and I guess in Web3 in general. I've never really felt passionate about, the companies I'm working for and the projects I was working on, because a lot of times it was about, making rich people richer or building social networks that don't need to exist and things like that. And I, found in the crypto space these ideals of progressive decentralization and focusing on user privacy, users owning their own data and things like that. And when I saw what Figment was doing, especially with the engagement with the Learn products, bringing people into the community, helping them understand these technologies and things like that, I thought that was an awesome approach, and I was really on board from the moment I heard about Figment. Really excited to be, thinking about the future, thinking how we can apply these technologies in different ways to provide, as much value as we can across the board. So. Very excited to be on the team. Very excited to be working with all these smart engineers. It's been great so far.
Excellent, thanks, Matt. And finally, we have Lukasz Mikowski. Lukasz, welcome to the call.
Hey, welcome as well. So I have pretty long backend story, not in the crypto world. I've been working on pretty much various distributed systems, like in advertising and like big data processing. But like I was always treated by many years blockchain not as it actually deserved to. I'm regretting that so much. I think that I should have, if blockchain was only presented to me in different way, I would probably be in the business, like for the very long time, because I see huge potential in that, and like this is something that may actually give people they like owning crypto is like your own token that you believe in something. So like this really matters to me, and like this is like something that never happened before in the tech industry. And yeah, I've joined Figment around a year ago. I've like just by accident, I was helping the friend, just random person that I've met on Facebook on some side project, and like it seemed to be a team lead, the other team leader in Figment. And yeah, like I've lost my job on the COVID situation. And this is how I got into Figment. And over the last year, I've created various indexers and projects in Figment. And probably so far the best one that works the best is transaction search, when we've kind of generalized all the formats from different transactions on different chains and created possibility to seamlessly, using the same API, search through various different networks. And this is like entire crypto is like really good and cool stuff, because like you can work on like very fake stuff, like just creating the apps. Or if you really like that, and if you really like the mathematics and like hardcore development, you can also deep dive in like Ethereum encoding and like Polkadot encoding, which is like very it's a great thing that allows you to grow as a developer.
It's very interesting that this space is very broad in terms of like the different sort of skill sets that are needed, all the way through from hardcore academic stuff all the way through to all of the like back end stuff that needs to be done as well. Like there's a role for everybody in this space. I think often it's something that we as a community, like the wider crypto community, is not so good at communicating. That it's not just a bunch of crypto engineers. There's all types of function and skill sets required in this space.
Yeah, of course. Like we are creating new work, like totally new work and new order of things. So it has to be really hard.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your introductions. We'll move on to the grant section, and I'll ask a few questions I have written down here around the grant itself. So my first question is, I think most of these questions will be for you, Andy, but anyone in the team that feels they want to answer, that's fine. So the first question I have is, it's around Figment already being an established force within this space. You guys, are prolific across many popular proof-of-stake protocols that we all know and love, including the Graph network. And you are one of the largest graph indexers since the launch and as part of the testnets. So I guess the question is, what does this grant enable for this ecosystem in terms of alignment and funding that other avenues could not enable?
Sure, yeah. I'm happy to answer that. What I want to do is talk about a couple things. One is give more details on the structure of the grant, because I think it's really important for incentive alignment. And two, talk about why we decided to do this. To me, it was sort of not obvious, and when I sort of brought it to my partners, my co-founders, it was something that they were sort of surprised about. But I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. So, I'd known Yaniv for a while, and we'd just been chatting, every quarter or so about how things are going. And Data Hub was starting to work, meaning we launched a bunch of networks and we got a lot of customers, and people like full nodes as a service. And what I began to notice is that if this is as successful in the people's adoption patterns, we've essentially just re-centralized the internet. And I was taking a very pragmatic approach. I talk to developers and say, why aren't you building your next thing as a DApp, or why aren't you building on blockchain? And the response was, well, I don't know about running full nodes on all this stuff, and so I thought, let's just take away the full node problem. But I saw that was sort of a dead end. Even though the product is scaling quickly, and you look at the success of something like Alchemy, I think ultimately our approach was sort of fundamentally flawed. And so we had looked at what we're doing with indexing, and a lot of our indexes were getting very popular, and we were taking an open source approach. And I would go and survey developers on a blockchain such as like Near, and I'd say, what's holding up? Why aren't you launching your new application? They said, well, we're writing our own indexer and it's taking so long. And so it became clear to me that the graph is something worth investing in, or it's a concept that's worth trying. And of course, the community is already very successful, and the protocol's gotten very far. And so that was some of the backdrop of this decision, which was basically saying, like, if you play out our strategy with DataHub, if we're successful and we're growing as fast as we're currently growing, we get to a place which you can't sort of undo. We're not working in the right direction, working on a short-term vision. So that's why we decided to move in this direction. And so, one thing I want to make clear about the agreement is there's nothing. You said like $90 million. It's not. It's all in tokens, and we have to earn those tokens over time. And the deal is specifically 80 million graph tokens, which is roughly half as much as 90 million right now, right? So it's 80 million GRT, and it's over 5 years. And we only earn those if we continue providing value. And so the way it works is that there's really two parts of this agreement that are important to understand. One is that we earn tokens over time based on the technical direction from starting with the graph foundation, and maybe over time, if that itself decentralizes, it will take technical direction from a different body. But we are essentially working on technical priorities that are assigned to us, and so that's something where we've agreed to have 10 people work on those priorities. We have much more than 10 people at Figment working on the graph, but that's sort of the base structure. And the other thing that's really important is I mentioned the success of DataHub. We are going to redirect all of the users and traffic to the graph. Anyone that could be making a request on the graph should be making a request on the graph. Anyone who's currently using full nodes should switch over to the graph. That is sort of part of the agreement as well. So for us, this is maybe more of a sort of burn the boats moment than maybe is first apparent, which is we're essentially throwing away or canceling our current successful product and going all in on the graph and redirecting everyone and all to the extent we can to use the graph. And so this is not a no risk thing for us, right? But we're pretty convicted. I'm very, very sure this is the right thing for us to be doing. But I wanted to just kind of make those points of the agreement clear, which is this is something that we have to earn over 5 years. And we had to put some skin in the game. We had to essentially agree to move all requests that can be possible onto the graph and essentially shut down our current service. So that's some of the backdrop to it. Specifically, why I think we're here, what we're trying to bring, we want to bring the graph to more networks. So I think about this in two ways. More subgraphs on more networks, which of course is very, very apparent. But we also want to bring some of our experience indexing entire chains. A concept. My daughter just ran in the room. Just a second. A concept which we're calling network graphs. Right now we have a concept called transaction search, which allows you to go block by block and filter transactions. But we want to bring that capability as well to the graph. And so there's really two things here, which is bring subgraphs to more networks and introduce this concept of the network graph. And so eventually, I really hope that through our work with the graph, we can completely replace the need for full nodes for a developer. If they want to, anything you do on a full node, I think could be done better through the graph, including eventually, submitting transactions and things like that. And so, I hope that our ultimate, work here with the graph replaces the need for anyone to run a full node and sort of replaces the interface. Full nodes will still exist, and of course, indexers need them. But I hope for dApp developers that our work on the graph can sort of replace that need.
That's really great nuance that you've given us there around the grant. That's very helpful. Thank you, Andy. We'll get into some of the detail, I think, around the network graph piece later on with Lukasz. Just sort of firing through some of these questions. Obviously, I have my own opinion on some of these questions. I just want to see what you think. during the, when these announcements were made, obviously there's big numbers in the announcements. They don't have the nuance that you've just given us. So I kind of wrote these questions with that in mind. So the second question was, the community has raised some concerns around awarding such large grants to well-capitalized established companies in the space, rather than dispersing those funds maybe directly into the open source software space or through a large graph protocol open source initiative. So what's your view on that? Do you think those two sorts of awards are comparable, or does core protocol alignment with an existing team bring something that, herding open software cats maybe can't bring?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we all want is to move towards that model of sort of, we'll call it direct funding or individual funding. And I think we can move towards that direction. But I also wouldn't throw away what I'd say the efficiencies of a team, right? There's something said for working together. And so I think over time, I hope we can do more and more of that sort of direct funding, or maybe that sort of Gitcoin type model. But for now, I think what is of the essence is sort of efficiency or speed. And I think that we can do it as a team of 10 who've been working together and who's been, developing indexing software on our own for, the past 2.5 years. My hope is that it's a mix. And so, we have 3 core teams now. And I think one of the great experiments is going to be, how does Figment and Streaming Fast and EdgeNode all work together as just the 3 of us? And then can we take those best practices and expand that into sort of more direct funding, would be my hope. And so I think this is a point in time where we are looking to have sort of team's attention and sort of the efficiency you get from working together for a long time. But I would hope that more and more of the grants become dispersed or direct over time.
Got it. I think you make some good points there around, the idea of 3 core developer teams interacting. This is not a trivial exercise in itself, right?
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of work from all 3 teams. It's going to take a lot of work from on the foundation side as well to work out how to orchestrate that. And Yaniv talked the other day about, we're at the starting point of blitz scaling, right? And how do we do that? That's the big question now, is how do we coordinate 3 teams with very different skill sets all on the same protocol, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, it's really insane just the sheer amount of engineering that's required to do everything we want to do, right? Like, we have a really great engineering team at EdgeNode, but there are things on the roadmap that we've wanted to do since like 2018 that we still haven't even had a chance to start. Because of just how much work it takes to do what we've already built, and that's just on a single chain. That's just on Ethereum. And so having the 2 additional core developer teams, especially folks that really have the experience that can hit the ground running, I think is actually going to allow us to cover the surface area that we need to index all of this data and to add all of the features that we need to make clearing that data really easy. And just the value of time in all of this. I think the graph has been really successful, and that's brought a lot of attention. And there are certainly teams all around the periphery that are kind of looking at what we've built and kind of thinking to themselves, hey, maybe we can kind of grab a piece of this. And so the speed at which we can expand, I think, is really important. And if we can do all of this expansion in the next 6 to 12 months, I think that really solidifies the graph's position and really ensures the long-term success of the network. And so I think it's really important for all of us to put the resources towards this and to move as fast as we can. And I think now we have the people that we need to execute on this.
So maybe a periphery question, Yanni. So you feel that at this point now, where we stand today, and the resources that we now have in the ecosystem, we're in a good position to achieve what we need to achieve in the next year?
I do. I mean, I think there's more areas for us to grow, but I think that the combination of EdgeNode, Streaming Fast, and Figment gives us really great coverage on the core graph node software. I think the big things in the short to medium term that we're focused on is the indexer re-architecture, improving indexing performance, I think we've heard over and over that that's the largest pain point, as well as the multi-blockchain expansion. I think Streaming Fast and Figment bring two really great and complementary sets of experience to tackle those problems. I think there is more that we want to do as far as abstractions, or just making adding more capabilities to how people can query the data, and other things on the developer tool side. So I think there's potential room for expansion on on that side. And there are other ways for us to continue to grow. But I think that as far as the core engineering resources that we need to put into Graph Node, I think we're in a really good position now.
Great, thanks for that added detail. We have a couple of questions left here, Andy. The theme is around stake centralization. So, indexers are very close to what's going on networks, and who has how much stake, who has how much delegation. And one of the concerns that I did see in the announcement is some folks worried that Figment being already a large staker in the Graph specifically and other protocols, people want to know what your position is on stake centralization, and what sort of what's Figment's thinking on maximizing the decentralization of stake.
Yeah, it's really important. It's something that, like I mentioned, we're on 50 different networks, proof of stake networks now, so something we track very carefully. I think the first thing we always say is we need really strong other indexers and validators working alongside us. It doesn't make sense for us to try to get as big as possible. It makes zero sense, actually. It makes the network weaker. And so I think what we've proven out is that we don't have to be the biggest. We're not the biggest on any network we're on. We're usually not even in the top 10. We're just on a lot of networks. And so that's one piece, is sort of at a high level, is we're not short-sighted. We're playing a very, very long game. And for us, I don't think we're often not in the top 10 on any network. I think there is a real risk, though, to centralization, I should say, and it comes from exchanges. We've seen a lot of networks around get captured by exchanges. And so, that's where I spend most of my time and energy, is figuring out incentives for people not to leave their tokens on exchanges. And there's a lot of good experiments there. And so that's what I would say is I do think that stake centralization is a big issue. I think centralizing within Figment is not a big issue, but centralizing around exchange is a very large issue. But to the extent that we hope to be very successful in the Graph and sort of earn our tokens over the next 5 years, what we've done is we've delegated all of them so far to other indexes. We've not delegated to ourselves. We have large indexers today, but that's none of those are really our own tokens. Those are all tokens that people have delegated to us. And so just wanted to kind of give that extra color there, which is, I do think it's important and is a problem, but I think the behavior that we need to look out for is actually more from exchanges than from a bunch of people delegating to it.
I think that's absolutely fair. You're right. The exchanges, taking up the stake and then offering, zero bonding products to their customers, super low friction, is a massive problem. So, have you guys thought much about how that, how you can tackle something like that beyond education, right? Because goodwill is a finite resource, right? With the consumer or the delegator at the end of the day. What sort of things have you guys thought about that you can use to tackle the problem of exchanges taking over the majority of the stake in a network, and therefore potentially governance?
Yeah, you're right. In terms of actually, and exchanges can, in many times, offer a superior product depending on what the user wants, right? Some users want to maximize their yield or APR, APY. Some users want to be as liquid as possible, so they don't want to have any unbonding period, things like that, and that's what the exchange will often offer them. Now, so there's a lot of ways you have to tackle this. I don't think there's going to be any silver bullets, just a lot of lead bullets. And I think a few things that I've seen start to pull people away from exchanges are airdrops, airdropping only to people who are holding in non-exchange addresses and wallets. That gets people to move off. And that coincided with like the rise of DEX incentives. I've seen that to be very powerful, specifically in networks like Cosmos. The other one that I've seen be pretty popular is I'm sure I lost my train of thought.
Exchanges, incentives for moving off exchanges.
Yeah, sorry, I'll have to come back to it. I totally.
That's okay. That's all right.
I forgot it.
Yeah, you make
one additional piece on that one also is governance, right? How much voting power and voting weighting do you distribute between network members and non-network members? And we already have a model at the graph that incentivizes network participation by putting higher weight on those that are in the network.
Yeah, and something else maybe it's worth mentioning is that as Andy said, liquid staking is something important for some people. So there's now some new solutions to provide liquid staking, and I think that with time is also gonna reduce the power of exchanges.
That is a major topic in its own, liquid staking.
Yeah, and thanks, Joseph. That's exactly what I was going to mention. Just seeing people move towards liquid staking for capital efficiency reasons. It's a reason to come off an exchange.
Great. Well, I think we've covered everything we wanted to there in the grant and the staking side of things. Andy, you've kind of already given us the Figment vision. So we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to try and make sure we get into the technical piece a bit. So I'm going to zoom a little bit down in my list of questions here. And I think maybe we'll just start with what does the first 90 days look like for Figment in terms of contribution? What might indexers expect in that period of time as well?
Yeah. So I will start fading out here, and I'll start handing off to Matt and Jessica and Łukasz. But what I would say is that this is one of the most exciting parts to me, because I think it's actually going to be a little bit messy when we start. We have a lot of ideas that have been sort of iterated on over a couple of years, and so does Streaming Fast, and so does Edge and Node, and we all sort of have a different angle on it. And this is sort of the beauty of decentralization, is that we're all going to try to come together and find the best idea. Right. And so I think that if we can get better or establish our individual sort of working workflows and ways we're going to collaborate in areas of expertise, because we all have an idea, we all want the same thing, which is awesome. And we all have sort of different technical approaches. So there's going to be sort of this like engineering symbiosis that's going to have to occur. And so I think we're all going into that with eyes wide open, in that we have started publishing using GIP templates some of our ideas. Luckily, all our code is already open source, and we have some prototypes and things like that. And so what I would expect in the next 90 days is just a lot of forum activity, a lot of ideas posted in the forum, a lot of community calls about how we're going to take these different ideas and sort of get towards this end goal we want. But yeah, I think we're going to have to sort of invent, adapt our own working style. From being within, a relatively small group of 10 people at Figment to joining with the Streaming Fast and Edge and Node team. So at a high level, that's what I see. I don't know if Matt or Łukasz or Jessica, you want to talk about technically what we're hoping to start with, but I just wanted to call that out just to say, I think it's going to be diverging before we start converging, but we're all sort of excited to go do that process.
Hey,
yeah, Łukasz, go ahead.
Okay. So yes, we've learned about joining the graph quite a while ago. Actually, we had to keep our mouths shut for some time, before you all learned about that, and this gave us ability to listen to the community and to join those meetings and to kind of incorporate the feedback that you guys were doing every week in what we were doing. And one of the best things that we can bring to the community is all of our experience with so many different networks. This gave us some time to thought about that deeply. So how we can even bring some new networks into the community and into the ecosystem. If it is right now so tightly coupled with Ethereum and all this all the other stuff that is purely built on Ethereum. This is why we thought that mathematically we should start with defining our contribution. And the very first thing that came to my mind was like there is nothing defined really. There is some space for definitions for the subgraph, but subgraph always was something that came from Ethereum. This is why we thought that we gather our ideas into form of documents that Andy mentioned earlier, and we didn't know really what template should we use for that. This is why we used the GIPs. We would be delighted to share in this GIPs with the community, although first, of course, in the forum, so you guys can give us entire feedback on that, and also anything that came to your mind on this meeting, although we do have 20 minutes left, would be valuable for us. We're all ears for your ideas about that. So also don't hesitate to contact us on the Discord, or we are pretty much everywhere. So you can contact, use whatever channel is fine for you. So the very first thing that I've mentioned is the definition of the network graph. This is the very new to the graph ecosystem. It was mentioned by plenty of people here on this calls, but we never had an opportunity to actually say what it is. So to define, to work and to plug anything into the ecosystem and to give the best of us, we defined how we should meant for the network graph to be. So that's our first document describing the data that we should gather from different, what we actually expect to do. And
so this is something. Just sorry to interrupt, Lukasz. So this is basically defining. This is above subgraphs, right? So this is defining what you need to do in order to index and serve queries for essentially at the end of the day serve queries for any network, right? So it would be defining all the networks that would be indexable by the graph.
Yes, it should be a kind of framework so that we would be able to communicate efficiently and know what comes from the different level networks, because as I've mentioned earlier, everything that graph, most of the things that graph indexes right now are the second level things based on the subgraphs, and then we are thinking of actually expanding that to the new networks. So this is why we need to have a differentiation between what subgraph is and what the network graph is. And for all of the other networks, one of the things in that document says that all the subgraphs are derivatives of the network graph. This entire thing unifies this idea. So afterwards, there is another very big problem with the Ethereum and the graph ecosystem. It is actually the processing and the code that if we decide ever to process different networks in current solution, it would have to be tightly coupled to the graph runtime. After a while, we came to the idea that currently the most used protocol on entire network is GraphQL. So it is great opportunity to actually bring GraphQL to the subgraphs. And with this very small change, we may bring the great power to all the subgraphs that are currently working. And because of this very small change, so literally adding just one function in the subgraph world, no longer any kind of processing in terms of mapping the data inside the graph runtime is needed. So this entire mapping stuff would be shifted into the subgraph code and the subgraph authors, because everything that leaves the subgraphs and enter the subgraphs would be just a GraphQL calls. This is like really big unification of the graph idea. And then if you think about that and like once again return that to some mathematical relationships, just adding this one function that allows you to call stuff using GraphQL from inside of the subgraphs, it allows you not only to ask the network graph for the data, but also using the very same interface, we may leverage that to ask other subgraphs for information, because this is something that we already have. And this is a functionality that we get for free. So this very functionality may allow you to create cross-subgraph connections and the nesting. And this is a functionality that was requested. Even I've seen recent tweet about that. So just adding that would give a huge opportunity to actually create a dependencies between subgraphs. So you may use a very popular subgraph that someone had created, and because in your subgraph you just need a fraction of that. So you don't need to, reindex everything. Or maybe you are more interested about merging subgraphs together. And there is a huge opportunity of optimizations on that field, especially that this is graph. We do have ideas for these optimizations. We didn't have that in the form of document yet, but like the two examples of such optimizations might be merging the all calls for the data for every subgraph that is currently deployed into the indexer, and doing that in just one calls. So just one fetch of the data from the source. So this is greatly limits the number of possible of the traffic between the processing and the source of the data. Allows to like greatly benefit in forms of optimization. So you don't need to query that over and over again. And for the part of the queries that is eligible for that, you might be able to merge that into one query, or even prefetch the data, just send that to the subgraph runtime, so it would be then distributed over all the subgraphs that waiting for the data as soon as the data arrives, even though we meant that to be in separate services.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys championing that. Just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, and just some context. So within the subgraph mappings right now, there's a store API that people use to like set and get data from the store, and it's a very limited API. You basically can only like retrieve data by ID, and that means that developers have to do a lot of work oftentimes to get specific data that they care about in their mappings to transform it. And if you could run a GraphQL query, or if we had a more expressive API for how you could get data, that would significantly simplify a lot of these mappings. There are quite a few considerations that we need to make as far as the dependencies that this introduces. If you're an indexer that is indexing just a few subgraphs, and the mappings, let's say, are like querying data from like another subgraph, then is that something that you can run completely internally within a single indexer, or do you take dependency on other indexers? And there are like economic questions that fall into this. So it quickly turns into like a large work stream to answer all of those questions. But clearly, first extending the store API and adding this type of functionality would give a lot of power to developers, and it's a really great area to explore.
Yeah, to elaborate on that a bit, there's also knock-on effects that need to be considered for the verifiable indexing and verifiable queries roadmap. So right now, actually, the path to get to verifiable indexing there's a pretty straight shot. It's just a lot of engineering work. Subgraphs are already written in WASM, and there's been a lot of work that's been pioneered by teams like Arbitrum and Optimism about doing refereed games on top of WASM-based execution. One of the things that makes it tricky from an engineering perspective is the store API. That's already one of the harder parts of the sort of verifiable indexing stack to design. And so making that API bigger basically expands the problem set to being much more akin to solving verifiable queries, which introduces kind of more exotic zero-knowledge proof techniques that need to be adopted. Not to say that it's untenable, but there's a lot of dimensions to these APIs.
Is it fair, though, to say that these are features that we need to be able to scale?
I think it's fair to say they would drastically improve the developer experience, and we need to figure out what are the key constraints that we need to enforce to make sure that we can maintain security and let's say scalability.
Got it.
Let me add one thing, both to you, Yannick, and to you, Brandon. So you've mentioned Store API, and I described the 2 points on my list because I always like to tackle stuff from the mathematical perspective and the relations between the entities. So we have the relation of the entity being the subgraph with external source. So this is how we get data from the network graph. We have a relation to the peer entity, the same entity basically, and this is a nesting of the subgraphs between each other. And I was trying to figure out because if we know in mathematics what the other way of relation exists, and this is the relation to self. And currently, with how some subgraph works, it might be quite hard to retrieve the information about past entries. And the retrieving of the information of the past entries of the same thing, you may think it might be stupid to actually call your own data during the creation of the subgraph. But actually it's not, because in plenty of times we ourselves in Figment need to calculate some, for example, indexer performance using the previous records that are there. And this, having a GraphQL interface that we already have, because this is what subgraph already has, and just using that would give you huge opportunity to query all the data from before to just create a new record. And this enables pretty detailed information about calculations, especially the analytical one, and we just get it from free because this is just adding this one particular function to this entire ecosystem.
Totally.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were pausing. Yeah, totally. So definitely not detracting from the value of these features. I think there's a ton of value as you described. I think the challenge, I guess, is making sure that we're kind of staying on the roadmap to scalability and decentralization. One other thing I will add, though, is for some of these things that folks have been trying to do imperatively in subgraphs, it's one of the examples I think that you're kind of referencing that we've seen come up is doing aggregations and other sort of aggregate statistics on top of data that you've already previously computed in a previous iteration of the mapping. And a lot of that stuff could be defined declaratively. So instead of having to actually make subgraph developers themselves write the aggregation logic into the subgraph and have to query the store for previous versions so they can compute a running average or some other aggregate statistic, a lot of that stuff could be declarative, which would allow the protocol to kind of treat these things specially and also do them more efficiently. And so that's some work that has also been kind of ongoing for a while, is thinking through what does it look like to enable more analytics style capabilities in subgraphs, and we're really excited that the Streaming Fast team seems to have a really strong background in kind of big data, and we've also been kind of staffing up at Edge and Node as well to kind of think through what those designs would look like.
Yeah, can I was one thing that I'll answer to Brandon's previous things, because I before I forget, and I know that we are running out of time, kind of, is that like our mission and our goal is to actually bring the most networks most efficient way to the graph. So it would be possible to work on that. And we like this is our goal, like to have the vast amount of functionality, even though it might not be as performant as you might expect. I believe that having the bigger number of integrations that might be optimized later in time is the way to go. And like this is something that Yannick was talking about, I hope, at the ETCC conference. But like we also have ideas how to make it much more performant using just a implying from the just way that the nesting of different subgraphs might be done in from the GraphQL, because like we are directly referring one subgraph from another, and this is mathematically really easy to prove that every stuff that depends on something else might be run in parallel without any cause of anything, without really any kind of definitions and putting that in any kind of schema or code, because like you can do that very simple just by like static code analysis or any kind of tooling that might be eligible to that. I know that there is 2 more minutes, so let me add one thing. There would be a third document that shows our best experience with developing indexers. And like this is the model that we proved we've tested by few years, and it evolved to be the most performant one. And this is the third document that we would like very much to show with you. And this is based on the other 2 documents and just implementing the ideas that are in the previous 2 ones. Also, we do have demo, but like please give us a little bit time because it's ready and it's working. But like to be presentable for you guys, it would be it would take a while to clean that up. So yeah, we would also present the working solution to you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to check out those documents and the thinking you guys have done here. One thing I'll kind of add just to close out the previous thought was just that we presented the 8 subgraph feature versioning and like support lifecycle GIP a few weeks ago, and folks were asking like, well, why would you have subgraphs deployed to the network that aren't fully supported, whatever that means at the time for the network. And this is a great example of a case where you might want to have sort of a more granular features, like for example an expanded store API, and then that expanded store API can go through its own life cycle of support in terms of becoming more performant, more scalable, more decentralized, more deterministic, et cetera. And so it's really nice that we have that capability to kind of have our cake and eat it too, in terms of rapidly developing the features that developers want to leverage subgraphs, but then also to decentralize those features over time.
There is one thing that I totally forget about this. I thought that I have a little bit more time, so sorry for that. There is one more feature that actually just once again came to us for free. If we are thinking about bringing the network graph to the network and enabling GraphQL API for that. And there was a question, I don't remember actually for what, from Jim some time ago, that we would like to, if indexers are indexing data and need to create some data outside of the network, why indexers would like to do that. So, and this is indexer office hours, so I think that it would be very important to you that all those changes would bring availability, so that we may create a model that indexers would just share the network graph without any subgraph with other thing. And in some cases, especially in self-hosted versions, it may make direct all the calls from people to you and not the third-party service that are sharing the data. So everything would stay inside the ecosystem. And yeah, I've talked too much. Sorry for that.
No problem, Lucas. There's obviously a lot of discussion to be had here in the future, I think. I'd just like to quickly ask if, so I understand you guys are going to bring some documents and proposals to the forums for comment. So everybody look out for those. Apart from that, what's the best way for folks to get hold of all of you guys? Are you on Discord now? Is there any other ways you want people to reach out to you?
Yeah, Jim, sure. We are on Discord, and we have our Twitter, but we are mainly present on Discord. So now you can see us on the right of the channel, right side of the channel. So you can text or message the person online, and we're gonna get back to you. And for the documents, we're gonna be posting them, I think, next week on the forum, so everyone could see and give their feedbacks there.
That's perfect. Okay, well, we'll close it there. I just want to extend the warmest welcome again to our new core developer team at Figment. Thank you to everybody for your contributions today, for being so generous with your thoughts and your time. We will see you again on Graph Index or Office Hours. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.